Hello and welcome to another episode of Basking in the Evergreen. It's my first one of this season because I was missing for the last ones. So thank you all for joining. For everyone else, AF Stewart is already here. Hello, how are you doing? So with me is SG Tash, who I am delighted to welcome because you won the Green Room last week.
I know. I'm so proud.
Yeah,
I was very excited to win.
It was good. You were very, very competitive. It was great. And after us, we'll be talking for an hour. Then after us, there will be Nikki DeKeuster will be on with the runner-up, Wayne Turmel, and both of you from Las Vegas. So, are you doing this from the same house?
No. I think we're actually about as far apart as you can get geographically speaking. I'm in the northwest, and he's in the southeast, I think, side of town.
Have you ever met each other in real life?
Oh yeah, no, we go to a weekly critique group together. We're actually sharing a booth this weekend at the Las Vegas Book Festival. Yeah, we see each other all the time.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So stay tuned, people, because he will be on in around an hour's time talking to Nikki, and I'm sure she'll ask him about you. And he's pretty old as well. And what we were just talking about before we came on was Clint Eastwood. So I have to close this loop. So we were kind of talking about Clint Eastwood for some reason, and saying he's almost a century old. So he was born in 1930. Wow. I did a quick Google of things that happened in 1930, and one of them was Pluto was discovered as a planet as it was known back then.
Oh, wow. So he's seen a planet arrive and disappear in his lifetime.
Right, yeah.
That's quite a life. And
Isn't it?
all the other stuff, but mostly that.
Yeah, because like those apparently there was the first ever FIFA World Cup as well in 1930, which was in Uruguay, which I knew that already. But yeah, so he was like, so whenever you think about Pluto, we've only known about Pluto for the same amount of time that Clint Eastwood has been on the Earth.
That is very weird to think about.
It's funny. I don't know why we're talking about this now, but we're going to have to. Is that the compression of time is such a weird thing to think about, because I remember seeing I like looking at all these kind of little factoids about how kind of time works and everything, and I saw one recently that was so there was less time between Abraham Lincoln's assassination and Joe Biden's birth than Joe Biden's birth and being sworn in as president, which is mad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just for my just in a very small microcosmic kind of way, the fact that I'm closer to 50 than 20 now freaks me out, and that's enough to just blow my mind. So saying that is, I'm gonna have to go lay down.
Yeah, well, you do have a cold as well, so everyone watching that, Sarah does have a cold. So this is why I'm trying to break your mind with these things.
You did say you were going to do that, so.
Yeah, I did say. So here's some. So Ireland was only 8 years old as a country when Clint was born. Yeah, it's true. That's completely true. Yeah. Wow. 1922. Ireland was a planet, a country. Pluto is still a planet. Don't be hating. That's the whole premise of a Rick and Morty episode.
I know.
Hello, Mr. Bahamut 16. How are you doing? So. Yeah, because there's something before we get on with the actual show. There was so I did history in college. I like history quite a lot, and my niece rang me up recently because she was doing a history project at school, and I answered the phone. I said, "Hi, how's it going?" And she was like, "Hi, Uncle Dave. I was wondering if you could help me with something with my history homework." And I said, "Yeah, that's fine." And she was like, "Because you were around in the late 1900s." And I was like, "Yes, I was."
Yeah. I guess if you want to say it like that, sure.
Yeah. So that's just the way that people think of us as being, we were born in the late 1900s.
Yeah. I don't know if I prefer late 1900s or turn of the century.
Turn of the century. Well, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 40, so I was like, almost a full adult when the century turned.
Yeah, I'm around there.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those things where like you have all these kind of like terms of like Gen X and millennials and all this kind of stuff, and I'm kind of grouped in that millennials thing, even though I think there's that like lost generation between like 84 or 85 or whatever. Because like whenever I'm called a millennial, I'm like, well, I was in the workforce when it turned the year 2000. Like I'd become an adult already by that stage.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't quite gotten there, but I was pretty much there. So I definitely fall in the elder millennial tag,
right.
I guess. That
Yeah,
people
yeah.
give, which I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because I was born in '83, so I was 16 on January 1st, 2000, and I was 17 at the end of that month. But so I was in England. That means I was in college, so I was working part time at the same time. So like I knew some stuff. I wasn't some wide-eyed child that was like, oh,
right,
growing up in the millennium or anything like that. So. So there's a very in-depth comment here from Facebook user. I don't know who you are, but please let us know who you are. And they say, remember, those who don't remember the past are doomed to repeat it. The rest of us get to smile smugly and said, told you. That is true. It's very, very true.
Yes.
So
did he mention that I have a cold today? I can't handle this.
Yeah. Oh, it's Wayne. It's Wayne. That's who it is. There we go. So yeah, we said that he knows. He's almost as old as Clint Eastwood. Yeah. We should do Eastwood talk at some point. With the way energy works, we are all in. Oh, geez, they're really trying to test you today.
Oh my god.
So
I only got through reading half of that comment.
I know.
I'm out.
Yeah. So I was going to say, let's move on to something a little bit easier to talk about. But this is always one of the hardest questions I find, where it is someone says to you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I think the best place to start is I'm based in Vegas, which I wasn't born here. I grew up in Minnesota for 18 years, lived in the same house my whole life. Went to college in Wisconsin, which I think is weirdly how we ended up talking about Clint Eastwood. Unrelated, just not worth explaining. But
that is true.
Yeah. And then briefly moved back to Minnesota, and then just kind of decided, this is too cold. It's too, I need to do something else. And I'd always had family out here in Vegas. My dad's brother and sister had lived out here since I was a kid. So it was always sort of a second home to me. And a few years ago, I think it's almost 5 years now, just kind of uprooted mine and my husband's life and moved out here. And haven't looked back. I really like it out here. And part of the reason it works so well is because we do have a strong community of local writers here that have been really, supportive. And I've grown so much in the last 5 years with my writing. I don't think I'd be anywhere close to where I am in terms of my skills and my volume if I hadn't come here. Okay, that's good. Well, I told you before that Nikki, who is going to be on afterwards with Wayne, is from Wisconsin. And this is how we got onto Clint Eastwood. You are correct. So she wants to know where you went to school, because she's going to stalk you, I think. Yeah, no, I went to Lawrence University up in Appleton, Wisconsin, kind of near Green Bay. So it's north of Milwaukee. And then I moved to Madison, and I lived there for 8 years. So those were the two places I was in. Yes, and Madison is why we started talking about Clint Eastwood, because I was like, is that the Bridges of Madison County? And it isn't. Which it is not, no. It's not. So that's how we got onto it. So so you've moved around America quite a fair bit, more than probably a lot of Americans have, because a lot of Americans kind of stay in the same state a lot of time. That's the famous thing that we think about in Europe, right? That's what we hear. So but how was it that you talked about moving to Vegas has really helped with your writing? So how, did you start before you moved to Vegas, or has it kind of just increased since you've been in Vegas? So I've been pretty much writing my whole life in one way or another. At Lawrence University, I went to school for English, and they didn't have a creative writing program at that point. So it was English Lit. and theater arts, because I originally thought I was going to be a playwright. So I did that through school. Then I started doing screenplays, and then kind of got burned out on that for a number of reasons, and went back to prose in like 2014, 2015. So I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years prior to moving to Vegas. But coming from writing like scripts where it's all dialogue, shifting to prose, it's not just like you easily slide into it. There's a lot of stuff you have to, there's a lot more that you have to write down when you're writing a book. You can't just, assume that they'll fix it in post, or that the director will make that choice or whatever. So I had to learn a lot, and I did it a little when I was in Minnesota, but coming here to Vegas, the biggest thing that helped me was it's a specific writers group. It's the Sin City Writers Group, which is where I know Wayne from, and where I know like almost all of my writer friends from. They meet twice a week, which I couldn't find in Minnesota. And I don't know why. Like, I could find once a month in Minnesota, and it wasn't enough. And here, people were meeting every week, consistently, the same people. So I was able to bring my work and get feedback, and it was good feedback. But it was also really coming from a place of like wanting to help and not wanting to tear you down, which I think is also not something you get everywhere. So it was the groups that really helped me. And also, at the time, we had the Las Vegas Writers Conference here that was put on by Henderson Writers Group. It still exists, but after COVID, it went fully online. Prior to that, it was in person, and that was another really supportive, helpful, educational resource that really helped boost me up and kind of kept me going through the pandemic, which happened almost a year to the day after I moved here. So I got one good year, and then everything kind of fell apart. And now it's finally starting to come back, and we're getting to a place where it's like, oh man, I was just talking to some people like, you remember when we didn't have anything to do during the pandemic? And now we're complaining about like, oh my God, I'm so busy.
Yeah. There's some things about it. It's a really strange thing. It was obviously a horrible time, and like there's a lot of people kind of were lost and everything like that. But there was a simplicity to it as well, where it was like, this kind of, it was like it was so different to what everything had come before, like in life, where there was that kind of thing where it was like everything was a little bit slower. And then it's kind of got back to where it was before. It's some bits that you kind of like, that was quite nice when I didn't leave the house for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
and no one cared.
Yeah. I mean, if I could leave the house, if I could do that, where it was just like, right, I'm going to go into quarantine for 2 weeks, like a self-imposed quarantine where nothing bad's happening. I'm just not going to leave the house for 2 weeks. And I'm going to focus on, I'm going to pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. And I'm going to just focus on this stuff. Because that's pretty much what it was. It was, paring down your entire world into whatever you can fit in your living room, essentially. And literally not having to worry about anything else. If I could do that again and not, fall completely behind on everything, that would be great.
Yeah. I just remember just unless I had to go out for a shopping run, which was like going into the apocalypse.
Right. Yeah.
I just used to just potter around the house between my house and my garden. I have a little bench outside of my front door, which I used to sit on sometimes and just stare around at the emptiness outside and be like, this is quite nice. But there was
I will say, like, being here in Vegas during the pandemic is probably one of it's an experience I'm never going to forget. Like, once, the shock wore off, maybe about 3 weeks into the pandemic, we went down to the Strip. And it was closed. It was empty. Like, it felt like you were walking around after the end of the world because there was nobody there. It was just, it's hard to explain how a place that's usually so packed with people and noise and cars just had nothing. And I think the weirdest part was in one particular place, there was still a sign that was advertising a St. Patrick's Day party. because
Right.
this had all happened right before St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And this was 3-4 weeks later. And it was just like, that feels like something that would still be there once the world ended.
Right. Because like, who's going to update it?
Yeah. It was so weird. And I feel almost like privileged to have been able to witness that in person. If I hadn't been here during that time, I think it would have been a lot worse for me. But I was where I should have been during that time. So that
Yeah. Just any people that are watching, if you've got any questions, please do ask them, and we will get to them all. Any comments on what we're kind of talking about? So, like we have some comments that Nikki's saying it was like a mini apocalypse. It was a mini apocalypse.
It was.
The pre-show to the main event. So, which is ties in nicely to what because obviously you write dark fantasy, but you've also done horror as well. And I think the first one that you wrote, was it the Dead Mall book?
Yep, the Dead Mall series is the first series I had.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, how would you describe that one?
That one is I conceptualized it as comedy horror. I don't know, having read people who write it much better than I do now, I don't know how true that is. But there's elements of humor to it, and there's certainly elements of horror in it, so take that how you will. But that's about a group of, it's about a teenage girl who lives in a town that's essentially gone through its own mini apocalypse. It's an old mining town in northern Nevada where the mine just gave out. It ran out. It died 8 years prior to the events of the first book. And it's essentially a ghost town, and she still lives there with her mom and with like a handful of other people. And she works at this mall that's also, basically empty of stores. Like we've seen a lot of malls turn into that in recent years. And then one night she gets locked in overnight. She finds out that monsters invade the mall at midnight, and she helps the custodians and the security guards fight them back down into the depths. And that's the premise of the whole series, is her working with these mall employees to fight evil, basically, and stop it from getting out.
And that's a completed series, isn't it? So how many books is that one?
So that's actually a novella series, but it is 8 total. It's 7 main, and then there's one prequel that is pretty much essential to read to understand the story. So 8.
So obviously it's set in Nevada, and obviously you moved there. So was that? Did you start this after you moved to Vegas, or no?
No, I knew basically. I probably had started thinking about moving to Las Vegas shortly after I moved back to Minnesota, which is bad timing. But originally, that series had been fan fiction for Army of Darkness. It had been set in an S-Mart store. And I had started writing it after I'd burned out on film production, and I just wanted to do something fun. And it was right, also, speaking of bad timing, that was about the time they started the Ash versus Evil Dead. Yeah. So it was like, well, this is, that's going to be canon, and so I'm going to throw this away. I can't even pretend that this is anything anymore. So I left it, and I started working on something else. It was a novel that I tried to query. Didn't go anywhere, got frustrated, got bored, just got sick of working on that. And I went back to the fan fiction. And I'd always liked the characters I'd written. The main character was still a teenage girl and her best friend. And a number of the other supporting characters had been in there. And I always felt bad that I hadn't really been able to do anything with it. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do with this? Well, I just have to get rid of, all the stuff that I don't own. And I probably should move it to not a big box store because that's too close. So where can I move it to? And I don't remember exactly how I came up with the idea of a dead mall, other than the fact that I've always kind of been fascinated by them. And so did some research and set it in a mall that I fashioned on a mall that's in Minnesota. But But honestly, like, I'm not sure why I moved it to Nevada. Just because I wanted to. Because I was like, I don't want to set it in Minnesota. I don't want to set it in Michigan, which is where it was originally. I've always kind of had an affinity for Nevada. And if you go up to northern Nevada, it is remote. Like, it feels like the moon up there. And it felt like a good place for monsters to live. In fact, I'm not convinced that they don't actually live up there.
No, it's so remote they might do.
Yeah. So that's kind of how that happened.
There's a lot of love for Wayne. Says the Dead Mole novellas are a lot of fun, so please do check them out. Wayne doesn't lie.
No, he doesn't.
He's famous for never lying. And lots of love for Bruce Campbell.
Of course. Hero.
Yeah, I was. I think Army of Darkness was the first Evil Dead film that I watched.
I think it might have been my first one too, actually.
Yeah, and I was very surprised when I went back and watched the first one to see like how like horror based it was compared to Army of Darkness. You know.
Yeah.
So how do you? So yeah. So obviously with Nevada, like with kind of like monsters and stuff like that, the heat is obviously a thing that's unusual for a lot of that kind of horror, because like, you know, they'll be set in kind of like damp forests, or like, you know, there's lots of rain and there's lots of water. So the heat thing must have been something that was a new thing to tackle. Was that something that you kind of thought about with it?
Weirdly enough, it hasn't come up yet, because the Dead Mall series it's 8 books, but it only happens over about a 3-month period in 2019. From January to the beginning of March, or actually I think it might be the middle of March by the end of it. And I guess a lot of people don't know this, but it gets really cold in the desert during that time, especially at night. Especially in the north. So I mean, here in Vegas, and we're in the south of Nevada. We're closer to like LA. We're 5 miles from LA. And we get, you know, the highs are probably 50s, 60s in January. And then in the north, it can be, you know, 30s, 40s. And it's still sunny, but it's cold and the days are still short. And then the new book I've written, Death by Misadventure, that kicks off in, I think it's April. So the heat hasn't really factored into that series just yet either.
And that's your latest book?
Yep, that just came out about a month ago. Yeah.
Joe says Evil Dead 2 is one of his favorite films ever. Evil Dead's great. Evil Dead 2 is great. I mean, it's kind of just like a remake of the first one, isn't it? But just like
but funnier.
Yeah, and a bit kind of with a budget this time.
Yeah.
And Nikki asks, how do you get creative? Before we talk about Death by Misadventure, how do you get creative with leftover merchandise in stores?
I mean, do you want specific examples or just? I mean,
the books.
Yeah, that's the normal answer is, well, you got to go read the books to find out. But I mean, for me, it's easy because that stuff is so just creepy by itself. Like, obviously, the first book features mannequins in a creepy way, because that's just inherently weird. I really can't say besides you're gonna have to just go read the books.
Go read the books. It is kind of, I don't know what it is. It's because especially in America, because like this is again from someone looking out into America from like, you know, through TV and film and books and what have you. Any shopping cart deaths? They
don't have shopping carts in malls.
Don't have them. It's they're so different to what they are in kind of Europe, because they're so huge, you know, and they have like department stores and everything. I remember there was a game that came out it actually came out the week before the Xbox 360 that's called Condemned. And a part of it, I don't know if you've ever played it or if anyone who's watching has played it. A part of it was like a first-person game, and it was like a supernatural investigation kind of thing. And there was a bit of it where you had to go into this abandoned department store where there's all these mannequins that are just left there. But the killer is he turns people into mannequins. So some of them come to like attack you. So you just be walking past them and they just kind of come to, and it's so freaky. And you just kind of think of that like as these massive abandoned places that are just like little cities.
Yep. Yeah, there is something so creepy about, and this probably ties back to the whole COVID-19 Vegas Strip being empty thing. There's something so creepy about a place that should be full of life and isn't.
Yeah.
It's just so wrong. And it's hard to explain why, but it is.
Yeah, and that was the great thing with I don't know if you've ever seen either of them, like the original or the remake, but Dawn of the Dead, where it was like,
I haven't actually.
You haven't seen either?
I'm actually not a big zombie fan, which is why like people will call Dead Mall a zombie book. It's not really. It's monsters. It's a lot of different monsters. Especially takes more from D&D than zombie movies.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because like with Dawn of the Dead, that was one of the things where it was like, we're better to hold up than a mall, because like they're so big and there's so much stuff, and if they can get it safe, then it's great. But all these kind of people that are like turned into zombies, they're all still trying to go back there because it's like part of them remembers that's what they used to just do, just go back to the back there and back there and back there. So yeah, oh geez, it's a shopping.
Where was that?
That's Joe's.
Oh, the smart carts. Oh, okay. All right, I stand corrected.
I have no idea what those are.
Oh, really? You guys don't have those? Yeah, they're kind of carts. They're mostly, I think, for children. Like they're half carts, half strollers, from what I remember.
Put it back up on there, Joe. Let's have a proper look at this. Wow, that's strange, isn't it? It's kind of like kind of look a little bit like luggage carts in the airport.
I think they are.
So they are just modified versions of them. Very strange. So you mentioned like D&D, and obviously you have written fantasy as well, and dark fantasy. And your latest book that came out in September, which is Death by Misadventure, a Las Vegas paranormal mystery, is, and this is not kind of a spoiler really because it's in the blurb. Adina Adventure is a hitman who can travel through an alternate plane using personal items connected to the target. So where did you get the idea for that one?
That one came from the title initially. I've always liked the phrase. One day I was just thinking about like the phrase "death by misadventure," MISA, and the rest of it. It's a funny phrase because it just means death by accident. Right. But then I looked it up, and it's not actually death by accident. It's like death by something that the person caught. It's an accident, but it's something stupid that the person did, basically.
Right. Yeah.
It's like the Darwin Awards, if anyone remembers what those are, if they're even still around.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that, and then because of what my brain does with words and things, I was like, well, what if we change it to MISS, adventure? How would that look? What would that be like? How would someone go about causing these sorts of deaths? And then it just kind of all came from there. It's like, well, she would have to be invisible. She would have to, find a way to make these things look like they've done it to themselves or some freaky thing happened. And then it just kind of built up from there. And also, I think the other thing I was sort of always had in the back of my head for years and years and years now is that Vegas would be a cool place to be able to walk around invisible and go anywhere you wanted. So that was the other kind of piece that factored into who she is, the main character. So it started with the name, it started with her and her ability, and then the rest of the plot just kind of went from there.
And is this the start of a new series?
It is. I I'm actually banging my head against the keyboard writing book 2 right now. And then there will be book 3 following next year around this time too. Very
good. Because we don't want to mention that to Wayne, because obviously Wayne on he hates series. That's what he said in last week's show of the Green Room. He hates them as an author and a writer. But I saw that he gave this book a 5-star review. So.
I know. He was one of the first ones that read it. So.
Oh, okay. In the writing group as well. Did you write it?
No, I didn't put it through the writing group, because the way the writing group works is you get 10 minutes to read every meeting.
Right.
So it takes a really long time to get like a novel
To
finished,
do
and I was on a
it.
deadline. I did bring in, like, I think the first chapter or two, just to be like, does this make sense? And people told me what didn't make sense, and I fixed that stuff. So
Yes. Yeah,
I think that helped a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know, there's a few. Some people do know about the Darwins. Joe says we just call it TikTok now. Which is, and yeah, every year people win the Darwins, whether they realise it or get a trophy or not. And yeah, viral video gone wrong, says Anita. And Joe also, before we kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that because there's some things I want to ask you about what you talked about on the green room, but Joe wants to know, are you not going to go back to film anytime soon?
Actually, I've just started thinking about going back to it. I probably would have gone back by now, at least to some smaller degree, if it hadn't been for the pandemic. Because Vegas has, I am not sure how robust the film community is here. I know they have a fairly strong playhouse and theater scene, but it took even longer for that to come back, as you might imagine, after the pandemic. So, and then by that time I had a baby. So my life is a series of bad timing things, I guess. But yeah, and this year they reinstated the 48-hour film project. If you guys know what that is, where you on a Friday night you get three things. You get like the name of a character, a job, and a line of dialogue, and a genre, and then you write, film, edit, produce, finish a movie by the end of the weekend.
Okay.
And I did that when I was in Madison. Actually won an award for best writing the first time me and my friend Amy did it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was very proud of that. Still am. And but it just didn't work out this time. I've been too busy. But I will say that my previous life as in film, I was doing the writing, I was in it, I was doing the editing. Like, I had probably 50% or more of the production that I took on, not because of anyone's fault, just because, I mean, I talked about it on the green room. I'm a control freak. And I was, if you can believe it, I was worse back then. So if I were to go back, it would be in like an extremely focused sort of way.
Right. Well, Joe says that he can introduce you to some people in that town.
Sweet.
Especially if you're going to do films based in Middle Earth, because Joe loves Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, and he would love to see more of it. I know I don't want to put words into his mouth, but he often messages me saying, "Can you just like set me up with some Tolkien fan fiction or some films that are made by student films and all that kind of stuff about it." He loves it, so please just make some and send it his way. If anyone wants to do that, actually, Joe would be very, very happy to receive any of it. So yeah, he would. So there's a few things that we want to talk about from the green room. So the main thing is, and it's more of a concern really, is that how has your sleep been in the last week?
Not bad, actually.
That's good.
Being sick has helped a bit, I think. Yeah, the last week has been okay. Better than normal, I think.
Better than normal. So you've been, because obviously you've just released a book, so part of the trying to figure out all release stuff while you're sleeping is kind of regressed a little bit.
Yeah, although now it's like trying to keep up momentum so people don't forget about it, which is challenging because it's easy when you're ramping up to a release. It's like, that's a big event. And now it's like, just remember the book is still here, and it's difficult to keep people interested, or if they at one point thought they might buy it but they haven't yet, incentivizing that, and then trying to expand, obviously, to get more people aware of it.
And kind of like following up on the thing that I really hate doing is following up on people that you sent ARCs out to be like, can you please leave a review while I've given you a free copy of this book?
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's a good or a bad review. Just
one
please.
sentence, just something. I need the number.
Yeah, for this free book that I've given you that I spent hours and hours and hours on.
Yeah, like a year working on it.
Yeah. And you mentioned it just before as well. Like your words, and these your exact words were, you're impatient and a control freak. So, and we kind of talked about it in the show a little bit, like how that kind of does go a little bit hand in hand with people that, market the first and he's trying to write the second. Yeah, that's right. You mentioned it on the show, but you know that it kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with kind of self-publishing and what have you. And you mentioned before that you kind of queried a book at one point. Do you regret like not doing that again, or are you happy kind of with the path that you've kind of gone along at the moment?
Do I regret not querying anything? You mean?
Again, since then, are you happy with kind of, because obviously there's pros and cons to both sides, but obviously you go if you do end up going trad, or even if you get an agent, you give up there's a lot of compromise and a lot of other things, and
right.
So is that something that you're kind of happy to have kind of given up?
Yeah, I mean, I never was in a situation where like I had an agent but couldn't get a publisher interested. So, I don't have anything to weigh my experience as it's been in self-publishing against, so this is what I know. And I think that's probably good. So I don't feel like I'm missing something. And also like when I queried, it was the very first novel I'd ever written. And of course I didn't want to believe it wasn't going to work out, but usually it doesn't, from what I've heard. And that was true for me too. And so it wasn't, I didn't get a whole lot of interest on it. I was never like anywhere close to getting an agent. So yeah, I mean, it's not like, oh, if only I tried a little bit harder. Like I was at the very beginning of that process when I gave up. And yeah, for me, I was fine with that because Deadmall, I could have queried that forever. And I don't think anyone ever would have signed off on a novella series, which is why I did it. I was like, if I'm going to I made the very conscious effort of, if I'm going to give up going the traditional route and I'm going to self-publish, I want to do something that would never have made it traditionally anyway. And that's why I chose novella, and that's why I chose this particular story. And ever since then, I just, it's a lot of work, but so is querying, and so is, trying to go that route. And this way, at least I'm out there. I can show people, like, I have this thing. It exists. It's real. I made it. And you can see it in front of you, instead of, I sent 50 letters to an agent and I didn't hear anything back. Like that's very discouraging for everybody.
Yeah, and it's like you also said one of your points on the, and we'll get to the comments in a second because there's a few comments going. One of the points that you kind of brought up on the green room was that the kind of look that a lot of people don't talk about, the look that comes up, and only because you have something that you sent out to people like agents and whatever, and there's been no kind of bite. So it doesn't mean that the thing is a bad thing. It just means that it's not either right for those people or what's kind of popular at the moment, or it might also be that they've just signed something very much like it, and they can and so all this kind of look does play into things. Yeah,
that is literally one of the first people I pitched in person said to me, I love this, but I have something just like it already. One of the first responses I ever got back. And it's like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And it's that kind of look. It is that kind of look thing that comes into it that no one really ever talked. Like I said, like a lot of people don't acknowledge like how the look kind of works in their favor. Sometimes you hear about it when it doesn't work in their favor, but when it does, it's always forgotten a little bit. Yeah,
exactly.
So we've got a few comments that have come in, and it's I think Nikki, it's actually about hospital bills. So I don't get hospital bills in Ireland. Actually, no, I do actually. yes, it's mostly free. We get it's 100 euro to go to the hospital, unless you're sent by a doctor first. So if you break your leg, you go to the doctor first, and they'll just send you to the doctor, and you don't have to pay for it. But you have to pay for the doctor, which is about 50 euros. So, it's kind of a strange system. But I did go to the hospital after finishing my last book, because I drove myself into exhaustion, basically. It was
what I'm trying to avoid right now.
Yeah, it's yeah. So so the last those books I was with an indie press, so I had quite a tight deadline on it to kind of get them to get the book out on time, basically. So it was a very, very tight deadline. And a cool mug. Let's show off the mug a little bit.
Thank you. It's a Ren Fairbuy. This is separate. It's holding my tea.
Oh, very good, very good.
Thank you.
So, you kind of write on the darker side of life.
I do.
And you go between fantasy and horror. Is that kind of are you like kind of happy to kind of play in that kind of sandbox where there's a lot of genres kind of mashed together, or is there like something that you kind of calls to you a little bit more?
I think what I'm writing right now with Misadventure is probably where I'm most comfortable. This sort of kind of modern, it's like contemporary gothic horror, or gothic, I guess you could call it, romance. It's sort of very atmospheric and slower moving, but I always have to put some sort of humor into my work too. Mm-hmm. So that's always really important to me as well, because I don't care what situation you're in. There's always got to be something funny happening, or there's going to be someone who's making a joke out of it, because that's how we deal with, especially with trauma. Some people, that's how we deal with it. That's how I deal with it anyway. Mm. So I like going dark, but then also buoying it with a little bit of sarcasm or goofy, like just silliness, something ridiculous, which is, I think, why the Dead Mall thing appealed to me. Is just, that series does get kind of dark, but there's also this element of just ridiculousness to it that you kind of have to balance. And I like that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing as well, like when you kind of write and stuff, there's kind of, Nikki says humor is essential for life. When you kind of write in that kind of like darker stuff, like the humor works a little bit better sometimes, because it's, it's a good release of tension, but also sometimes the situations are just a little bit ridiculous,
right?
And you have to kind of like, you kind of have to poke at it a little bit and just acknowledge it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of gallows humor. So there's like in Dead Mall, there's a lot of situations where people are, it's life and death, and it's pretty bad. But there will always be someone who's there to like point out, just like, this is absolutely ridiculous. What is even happening right now?
Right. Yeah. Yes, Nick, especially in horror, the darkness is all the more pitch black for the light contrast. Yeah. Yep. That's right. That's why Scooby-Doo is king. And King is king.
Meddling kids.
Yeah. Joe. What about Joe Hill? Is Joe Hill not the prince, the dark prince of horror and humor and other things? Comics, I guess. Superhero comics. Did he do something with Lock and Key? That was Joe Hill, wasn't it? I think.
I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list, literally right now.
But
but I am because it's October. I'm working my way through Mike Flanagan's stuff. So I just finished Midnight Mass last week, and then House of Usher. I started last night at 9:00, which was a terrible choice for someone who has problems sleeping.
Right? Is it good? I've heard good things about it so far.
Yeah, I'm only 3 episodes in, but oh man, it's exactly like it's not. It's got some kind of humor in it, but it's pretty dark. But I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah,
I'm gonna I'll probably watch it over Halloween week, I think. He's got the rights to the Dark Tower series now, hasn't he? So he's apparently developing something for Dark Tower. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, hopefully it pays out, because the the Idris Elba.
I didn't even see it.
Oh god, it's.
I was like, one movie? No. When they said it's going to be one movie for all of the story, I was like, I'm out. That's not happening.
Yeah.
Just gonna pretend this doesn't exist.
Sam Raimi, yeah, he's great at doing that. See, the thing with that Dark Tower movie was how people talk about House of Usher and
sorry, Wayne just said it's full of Poe Easter eggs. It's true.
Oh yeah, that's
pretty
good.
Much made of all kinds.
Can't wait for. I think that's Dark Tower, and he's writing the script here. I think he usually directs everything that he writes. He writes the script for a lot of time, doesn't he, as well? I mean, the thing with that, with the premise for that Dark Tower movie was that it was set after the books. Because
that's what they said.
Yeah, because Roland had like the I can't remember the exact because it's been a while since I read it, but he had
spoilers.
That kind of, spoilers
for a book that came out like forever ago.
Yeah, and the film that no one really watched.
No.
So he had that Horn of the Eld or whatever it is, or whatever it's called.
I can't remember. It's been probably 8 years since I read the series.
Oh yeah. So he has that in the movie. So it's kind of like they were like, well, it's kind of like a remix because it's kind of set afterwards, but it was also like it's just really bad as well. So, Doctor Sleep was awesome. The director's cut is great as well. The one that's so Amazon Prime has the director's cut of Doctor Sleep, and it's really, really good. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Mike Flanagan and Stephen King and their love fest at the moment. We're here to talk about Sarah and our love fest for you. So, so the other thing that you kind of brought up into the green room was unsolicited advice from people, particularly people telling you what you should be writing and what you shouldn't be writing, yes. Which kind of ties in nicely. It was one of the good things that you did actually on the green room was that a lot of your points were kind of well linked together. I could see the stay focused. Yes, I could see the through line. So not only was like one of the things convincing, but then as a whole, the whole thing was quite convincing as well. I was like, yeah, actually, yeah, you guided me through your points quite well.
This is why you should vote for me.
Right. Yeah.
For whatever.
So, I mean, you're saying that particularly it happened recently at a kind of a book event where you had people say it. So you're going to another one this weekend. So are you expecting more people telling you what you should be writing?
Not as much. The one that's happening this weekend is like I said, it's the Las Vegas Book Festival. And it's a much bigger event. The one I was at that I was talking about last time was, I think it was 30 authors in one room. And at any given time, I think there were at most like 8 people coming in to buy. This one, the readers will outnumber the writers quite a bit. So I expect that there will be a lot less people who have heard of me. So I don't think they'd presume to tell me or care what I write. They're just going to kind of be like, oh, okay, that's what you write. And then they'll decide if that's for them or not. Yeah. And I also think the writers, us writers that are there, hopefully, if last year was any indication, we'll be too busy selling books and talking to readers to go out and give people advice that they don't want.
Right.
One can hope anyway.
Someday when the rights revert, the masses, we can see lots of Wheel of Time and Dark Trail crossover stories. Well, it's quite a while, but I did notice, and this Joe will be interested in this, that Middle-earth and all Tolkien's work becomes public domain in 2061. So not long ago. Actually, no, 2041 or something. It's something like I'll be 60 when it happens. So in 20 years' time, so 2043. So. No, you won't, Joe. You'll be. I think you're 50 this year, aren't you? So you'll be 70. So you've got stories left to tell. You can do it.
Start writing
everywhere. It'll be everywhere. I think we all will wish, because I mean, I love Tolkien so much, but it's going to be it's going to be the apocalypse of Tolkien stories just everywhere, writing stories in Middle-earth.
Yep.
Which is not great. So. Hopefully they can kind of extend that in some way. But so Yeah, I mean, you might get people going up to you saying in 20 years' time saying like, why don't you write this story set in Middle Earth? Why are you writing these things about assassins, paranormal assassins, when you can be writing about this? I mean, what is it? Why do you think people? And it's, if I may be so bold as to say, it seems that it's a thing that doesn't happen to men as much as it does to women.
For some reason, I knew you were going to say that, but I think you're right. I think that's probably true.
Yeah, and it's mostly men saying it as well. It's not like, I'm sure there's like, there's other women say it to female writers as well, but I think it's generally kind of comes from men as well. So why do you think that is, where it's like, say if me and you were stood at a table selling books, where someone would be more comfortable going up to you and saying, why don't you write this, where they won't say the same thing to me?
Oh, man.
Because of what Joe says.
Well, so that's actually kind of what happened, except my table mate was, so the person who came up to me was a man, and he was older than I was by some number of years. And the man who was sharing my table with me was also older than me by some number of years. So I don't know if it's necessarily just a gender thing. I think it's more of an age thing.
Right.
I think, and in Vegas, a lot of the writers, there's more and more people who are my age and younger coming up in the writing community here. But before, like previously when I first got here, and still, it is an older population. And I think it's, it's probably, I want to believe the best, because I'm not like really, really angry at this person, just annoying. And I'm not angry at the person at all. I think it comes from a place of just wanting to pass on knowledge, and just picking a really bad way of doing it.
Yeah, because like, if you want to write something, you're going to write it. You might just not want to write. I mean, we can all go off and write werewolf shifter romance fantasies and make loads of money doing it if we really wanted to, because like, there's such a big reader. What's that?
I don't know if I could. I think I'd be really bad at it.
Well, we could try.
We could, yeah.
I don't know if the quality makes much of a difference actually. Like, they just
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know how discerning.
They don't answer. We should find out. But anyway, we could go and write. We could all go and write to market as much as we wanted to, right?
Yeah.
But if it's not something that we want to do, then why would we do it? Because some men think we should all write romance. Yeah, that is true. Mansplaining, yes, possibly. I don't know. I couldn't possibly comment. Wayne just does it to everyone. That's the way to be, I suppose.
I think that's the best way to be, honestly. I probably would have been less annoyed if that person had said it to the 60-year-old man sitting next to me as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is funny because I kind of get it, because like, I wrote one of the first things I wrote was just like a straight up crime thriller, which was released on this kind of like app. It was kind of sat on my. It was actually with a publisher, and then they closed down and it went somewhere else. And then I got an offer for it to be kind of split up into chapters on an app called Yonder Stories, and it's not available in Ireland. It's not available in the EU, where it is in America. And it's just a straight up crime thriller set in 1940 Santa Monica. And but my main thing is fantasy, and people that actually know me that don't read my fantasy stuff are always like, can you not just like write more stuff like that one? And it's like, no, I'm just not interested in writing it, anymore. And that's just a thing that sometimes people forget. Like, you want to write what you're passionate about, and it sounds that's what you're kind of doing at the moment with Misadventure. So you're writing the second one at the moment.
Yes, I am.
And when do you think that one will be out?
That'll be out April 9th, because it's already on pre-order. So it's definitely coming out on April 9th.
Excellent. It has to be.
Yes.
And then you were saying that the third one will be around this time next year.
Yeah, I think that's September 10th. They're both on pre-order right now, just so people can see that like this is a thing.
Right.
It's that writing in series thing, you know, you need to show people that like there's going to be more so they feel comfortable about starting it at some point. So yeah, that'll be out. I think it's September 10th is the third book.
Okay. And is it going to be a trilogy or is it going to be?
No, I'm just going to keep writing, I think. I have plans for a fourth book, and I think it's the weirdest statement, but I think I started planning a fifth one. I don't remember if it's just the fourth one or if I've split it into two. Right. But there's going to be at least 5, and if people keep reading it, I'll keep writing it.
Excellent stuff. That sounds great, and I'm looking forward to it. I do an urban fantasy series. It sounds like something that I would really, really like. So I'm going to check that out as well. So and I hope everyone else does that has been watching. And I think we're almost at the end of our hour. So I could probably talk to you for a lot longer than this as well, especially about Clint Eastwood, which we didn't realize we had it in common that we knowledge of Clint Eastwood. But thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at any time. And thank you for everyone who is watching. And if you do stay tuned, because we will see a little advert before before Nikki and Wayne are on. And yes, until next time, it is always time to go indie now.
Lovecraft was wrong. Fear isn't the strongest emotion. Fear only causes 3 reactions: fight, flight, or freeze. Love, on the other hand, love is limitless and far more deadly. Nikki DeKeuster has also penned 2 books in the Bittersweet Empathy series, which follows Amy Doreen, an apathetic deviant suddenly struck with the ability to feel and manipulate people's emotions. At first, it's all in seemingly good fun, but the people she touches loses something of themselves and are never quite the same afterward, including Amy herself. Through blackouts, bleedovers, and the surety she's being watched, Amy must discover the horrifying truth behind her empathy before her 6th sense becomes her only sense. Available in Kindle Unlimited and paperback. See NikkiDeKeuster.com and PhoenixFeatherEdits.com for more.
Today's show is sponsored by Nikki DeKeuster with Phoenix Feather Edits. Phoenix Feather Edits offers uplifting and detailed support for your story. Each tale is unique, beautiful, and worth being told as only you can tell it. Nikki assists with shoring up structural, character, pacing, and plot elements as needed so that your story shines as brightly on the page as it does in your soul. Nikki specializes in developmental editing, manuscript evaluations, and outline critiques. Contact her for a free 1,000-word sample edit to see if she's the right fit for you and the story burning from your fingertips.
Do you want to say hi? This is my daughter, sorry. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. I heard absolutely nothing back, so. Hello, welcome to the second section of Basking in the Evergreen with me, Nikki DeKeuster, and Wayne Turmel. Is that how you pronounce your name?
That is indeed how you say it.
And we have a new sort of setup here, which is interesting and got to get used to it. I like it. Like we've got the books below and over next to you. That's kind of cool. And so why don't you, Wayne, introduce yourself for anybody who might not have seen the previous portion. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and the many things that you do.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Hi, my name is Wayne Turmel. I am an old cishet white guy living in Las Vegas. I write a bunch of things. I write nonfiction for work, and then to save my sanity, I write fiction. I have 6 novels, will be 6 novels when the new one comes out, 3 historical fiction, 3 urban fantasy. and I'm just digging hanging out. I am friends with Sarah, who was just on, and we're part of the writer scene here in Las Vegas. What else do you want to know? I'm an open book, sadly.
Well, yeah, and I think that's an important thing to bring into consideration. It is a whole world and a whole community, and a very supportive one, I found, on the whole.
Yeah, I think so. And even the Go Indie Now people, I'm developing relationships with folks that, we read each other's work and we're supportive and all of that good stuff. I have this firm belief that, typing is lonely, but writing is social.
Yes, especially when you find a good critique partner or critique group, then it becomes... I don't know. I find
we're
it
the
like,
only ones that know what we're we're the only ones that know what we're going through.
yes, there's a
If
solidarity.
you're lucky to have a supportive spouse, which I am, she is two things. She is incredibly supportive and basically useless to me in my writing.
Oh,
Right?
yes.
So when
I was gonna say, is she gonna be like coming in to strangle you? Stage left.
No, it's all good. She understands it. She read something the other day and went, I don't know what you want me to tell you. I liked it. I can't tell you why, and I can't tell you how to make it better, but I love you,
Well, and
which
that's
is
the good
lovely.
point,
We
too,
need
that
to hear that.
there's the reader and the writer mind, right? And sometimes
Right.
oftentimes they do merge because writers will be readers, but it doesn't go the other way all the time. So sometimes people are just like, I don't know, I liked it. And it can be hard because it'd be like this thing that I struggled to create, and you get 3 words, which is better than I hated it or silence. I think silence is worse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're like, oh, no. So yeah, you have a gift in knowing Sarah. Did that make it a little bit more difficult to battle her out?
She stopped me like I was the fat kid at Altamont. Um, she's terrific, and she's very smart and all that good stuff. And we're actually sharing a table at the Writers Fest in Las Vegas this weekend. So
And that is
it
excellent
didn't
too,
get too
because
bloody and personal.
yeah, it could take off some of the cost, right? So you're supportive of each other that way, and then
Exactly right.
you got somebody to talk to if there's downtime, and somebody else to sell your book.
Exactly.
Right?
When you need a biology break, somebody has your back and won't will keep people there until you return. So,
Or I don't know, I found that having like somebody else be like, hey, this is an awesome book, you should try it. Well, who wrote it?
sure.
If it's somebody that isn't the author, that carries a little bit more weight, because then they're like, oh, here's this
Absolutely.
who doesn't need to be saying these things. So maybe I'll take a look, because of course I think on some level, we love our stuff, or we wouldn't have put it out there. You know what I mean? So of course we think it's good. Although I can't always say that. There are plenty
Although
of
I am shocked at
not-
how many writers cannot string together 3 sentences to tell people what a book is about.
it's hard, that
I have
elevator
sat
pitch,
with
right?
I have sat with so many authors, and I just cringe. Like I'll say, these are my novels. These 3 are historical fiction. This one is this, this, and this. And these are my Johnny Lycan Werewolf PI series. Book 1, book 2, book 3 is coming. I've got the spiel. It takes 90 seconds and I'm done. And the guy next to me is like, well, they're rather humorous books about Area 51. And I'm just dying inside for this person. Because
Give me that.
the guy I'm thinking about is actually a good writer, and the books are lovely, but he's not convincing me to shell out the $15 or $20 necessary to do that.
But I think it can be hard too because like there's so much that goes into the story and so many nuances to it a lot of the time. So to condense it down even into a blurb, that was just like such a process for
Yeah.
me anyway. Like some people just knock them out no problem, but like I'm like, oh, what is the essence of this? Because there is so much to it. I almost think that we're too close to it. It at least some of us, our minds work that way, right? Because we all come at this with different mindsets and different strengths and
Absolutely.
weaknesses.
And
So
my thing is, I am a shameless hoe and therefore will do anything to sell a book. And so the elevator pitch is absolutely critical to do that. And so I worked on it really hard.
yeah, I mean, and that's there's something to be said for that. Plus, you can work on your editing chops, right?
Yeah.
With having to really get down to so many words, you only have so much time or so much space on the back cover or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm schlepping a screenplay right now, and there's something called the log line, which is the 2 or 3 sentences that convince somebody, hey, maybe I want to read this screenplay.
Mm-hmm. The
And
schlag
it is
line.
a
What a term.
log line. Log
Oh.
line.
Okay, log.
No, schlepping. I'm schlepping a log line.
Schlepping the schlag. We should make that a term though. Schlag.
It should. It should.
Just combine them.
But it is a difficult thing.
Yes, it feels like a slog for sure. Mm-hmm. But a labor of love slog? A slov? Shlov? We'll get these into the Urban Dictionary. Do you find yourself using tools like that? I personally really love Word Hippo for like if I have to find, for a thesaurus. That sort of thing.
I've got a couple of words in the Urban Dictionary, but I haven't done Word Hippo. Good heavens.
It's really good. Like I used to use thesaurus and I've used Urban Dictionary and stuff before, but like Word Hippo kind of will have a combination of the two. So you should check it out. And it's smart.
Okay.
Like it knows what you want to find, even if you don't know what you want to find. So anyway, so the question then is, how do you feel about losing to Sarah? Like, was it easier because you know how fabulous she is and she's such a good friend?
It's certainly I prefer to think of it as David taking pity on the rookie, because it was the first interview that she had done with Go Indie Now, whereas people are starting to get used to this face. And so I just assumed that it was a pity win because she couldn't possibly have been more entertaining and or smarter than me. You got to realize, look at me. I have been on this earth for a very long time. And if I'm so smart, why am I so broke? Losing
because
is
money
not unusual. I have learned to deal with it.
Money is not everything. It's nice. It's great in many ways, but it is not everything. And depending on your spiritual philosophy,
it's kind of, everybody keeps telling me that money doesn't buy happiness, and I keep saying, give me enough to conduct the experiment.
Oh yeah,
I will be fair. I will be honest, but let me run that experiment for a while.
You can buy a lot of happiness with money. I'm not saying that it's not a good thing, but
or at least,
right? It's true. Like you could be a billionaire and still be very lonely, right? So that's all that's really saying at the end of the day.
Yes,
but you can
theoretically that is true.
It'll get you a big chunk of the way there, and it will certainly buy you your own personal therapist.
As I say, I am willing to conduct the experiment and take one for the team.
Yes. So there are no hard feelings with
heavens,
with
no.
David then, right? You're not one of his growing list of haters.
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all.
You
This
get
is
it.
all in good fun, and it's like I was saying earlier, it's just this network of people that we're all meeting each other and getting to know each other's work and hang out a little bit, and that's fun, you know?
It is. It is. I found that that's been definitely a plus to this whole journey, because it is. It's very, very quiet at times, right? And insular. So being able to have those people that understand that there is the need for that too. That like if maybe you go inward for a while, it's not a reflection on how you feel about them. Because I have writer friends that I won't talk to for like weeks on end, right? And then I'll be
Sure.
like, hey, what's up? And you just pop back in and it's like they never left. So
I was like, oh, you have a new book out and the emails start. Perfect.
yes. So you had a quote on your website that really struck me, and I like it for a lot of reasons, and I also sympathize with it, I guess. And it was that you ran from the circus to join the real world. Like you were 20
Yeah.
years in stand-up comedy, right? And I was like, that's both intriguing and heartbreaking in some aspects,
It
right?
can be.
Yeah.
It can be. Here's the thing. Straight out of high school, I started doing stand-up. I achieved some plankton level of success. I was able to work almost 15 years without having a day job. It brought me from Vancouver to Toronto and then Toronto to Los Angeles. And that's where I met my bride. And, I gave it every shot there was to give. I was working the road. I was a working comic. I was pretty good at it, frankly. But the business is what it is. And I decided that I would make the shift to try to write. And I had a couple of screenplays made, or a couple of screenplays optioned, never got made. And I was kind of the king of close calls. My favorite thing is I was this close to signing a deal with a manager, very well-known comedy manager. And I went to her house to sign the paperwork. And there was no answer at the door. These were, pre-cell phone days. You left a message on a landline like the dinosaurs that we were. And so I went back the next day. Bang, 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 nothing on the door. And finally, after 2 weeks, she had just ghosted me, completely gone radio silent. Somebody said, oh, didn't you hear? And I said, what? And they said, she was committed. She'd had a total nervous breakdown. And so this was the clue for me that it was time to seek other income, when the only person in Hollywood who actually believed in my career was clinically insane.
Well, it helps in getting by. And Joe would probably attest, in Hollywood, you have to be, or it makes you that way.
No, I don't mean crazy. I mean clinically, medically, like, so that became, and I had a wife and a child, and child insists on eating, and the reason that I bring all this up is that in a way it's coming full circle, because now, while I still work and I have a day job and that's demanding, I'm on the downside of my career, so I'm spending more time doing the fun stuff. But also, my wife and I talk about this all the time. She was an actress. Again, kind of plankton level. She did sitcoms, she did commercials, but she made a living, right? And we talk to each other all the time and say, isn't it amazing? We both gave it the shot, right? We left nothing on the table. We did everything we could for our careers, and we had enough success. I mean, our daughter was a SAG baby. She was born in a really good hospital, and it didn't cost us our life savings because my wife was one of the 8% of actors who qualified for medical insurance. We never became big stars. We sometimes think coulda, woulda, shoulda, but at the end of the day, we gave it a shot. And so many people, especially when we left LA and moved to the Midwest, almost everybody we met was like, yeah, I always wanted to give that a try, or I always wanted to try that, or I wish I'd moved away from Chicago for a while just to live somewhere else. And they didn't. And it's a voluntary imprisonment.
Yeah.
And so the one thing that Joan and I remind ourselves all the time is we took our shot, and most people don't. And it wasn't like we took our shot and got nothing.
Yeah,
you know,
all that experience and stories,
and no experience is wasted. And the stories are great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first time somebody invites us to a dinner party, we got great, how'd you get here? What did you used to do stories, right? Not everybody does.
Yeah. So you're the walking poster child for take that leap of faith, right?
And, you know, it doesn't always work.
But, you know, there's no regrets either. And there's something to be said for that.
You know, it would have been nice when I see people who weren't as talented as me, you know, get somewhere. It's incredibly irritating and aggravating. Or if I see something on TV that is just bad, right? There's a part of me that goes, you could have done better.
Sharknado type stuff, yes.
You know?
So you brought up dinosaurs before, like just
yes.
And you remind me so much of John Hammond, especially with that hat on. I'm sure that you've gotten this like
I didn't wear that. I didn't wear the hat today. Funny story. All the time, I get that.
Yeah, it's spitting.
Matter of fact,
I had to do like a double
I'm going to
take
show you
the
something.
first time I saw you.
My daughter for Christmas gave me a picture of John Hammond. It's up on the wall.
Okay. See
behind me. For years, I have gotten this, even before I was totally white, which I am now. And for those of you who don't know who I am and what the hell's wrong with you, I usually wear a hat. I usually wear a fedora style hat. And it started, gosh.
Yeah, you wore it in the first in the green room, so they
can
go see that.
Truthfully, I came up early to watch Sarah, and I forgot my hat downstairs, which is the only reason I'm not wearing it.
See, Sarah, shenanigans.
But what first time it happened, I was taking the train into Chicago from the burbs, and Lollapalooza, which is this big music festival that happens in Chicago, and every stoned kid in the western suburbs was on the train going in. And I was in the restroom at the train station, and this kid walks up to me, and he's like this far from my face, and he's tripping. And he just looks at me and goes, dude, you look like the old guy from Jurassic Park. And it's happened to me walking into convenience stores. I had a clerk in Indianapolis just start yelling, spare no expense. And the best one was in Guatemala. I was going to a conference in Guatemala, and my driver and I stopped for coffee, and we're sitting there having coffee and chatting, and he's looking at me, and I go, this can't possibly be what is about to happen. And he looks at me and goes, you know who you look like?
You know.
I went, oh, no. He goes, Jurassic Park, the guy with the hat. Third world nations think I look like John Hammond.
Yes. So I am completely in good company with this.
You are completely in good company. And you can tell I have made peace with it. Now, the fact that, you know, Attenborough was 10 years older than I am now when he made that movie is a little humbling.
So here's a thing. Just putting this out there. Could you combine your John Hammond cosplay without even trying, right? With like some stand-up or sketches or whatever having to do with dinosaurs and parks, and like make that a thing? Because to me it's a gift that not everybody has, like literally, without getting plastic surgery. It just seems to be
Okay.
right there.
I'm going to take that. Remember, for those of you who didn't see the earlier conversation, go back and listen to Sarah's thing the other day about unsolicited advice and how do you respond to unsolicited advice. So this is me listening very politely and nodding and
It's just
taking
an
your
idea.
feedback.
Yeah. You don't have
Exactly
to.
right. It's an idea.
Absolutely.
It's feedback. I'm taking it and I'm filtering it.
Mhm.
Because we all know when you get feedback, like even in a critique group, right? There's 3 buckets of feedback. There's, holy cow, I never thought of that. That's like the greatest thing ever. Thank you. And that is a very small bucket. The second bucket is, never thought about that. Have to give that. That's where this falls, I think. It falls under, And then the third
I
bucket.
often get that reaction.
The third bucket is, you're a moron.
Yeah.
But thank you for your input. I appreciate it.
I'm just trying to help out you and the world.
You're a giver.
Yes. There you go.
You're a giver, Nikki, and that's not always appreciated, and I do appreciate it.
And you are a comedian.
Used to be.
Used to be.
Used
Well,
to
I
be.
feel like that's probably always in your blood somewhere, you know?
Well, it is.
20 years. Like, even if you're not doing it professionally, you're still spouting off the one-liners.
And, nobody becomes a comedian that wasn't one in the before times, right? Like, even as a kid.
Yeah.
I was the hyperactive, redheaded, smart aleck kid. Right. And I got that back with my daughter because I remember saying to my daughter she was about 8 years old, and I had to give her the speech an adult, because if it's funny, you'll skate. If it's not funny, it's your butt.
Yeah, it can be brutal.
But, my whole life I was the class clown, this, that, the other. And that doesn't go away just because you hang up your mic. And so it shows up even in, my earlier novels are all historical fiction, and there's nothing particularly funny about the Crusades and orphans being cast out of orphanages. But there's funny stuff that happens. Life, you only look at life with horror or humor.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 2 extreme reactions.
Find the humor in the horror.
It's a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So were you particularly drawn to like certain historical contexts so much so that, because I see that you've got ancient Egypt in your writing, and the Crusades, and like these are really like interesting, heavy historical
Well,
settings.
the first one, Count of the Sahara, the Count of the Sahara is a character that I was fascinated with for years. I had become obsessed with this archaeologist named Byron de Prorock, who was the most famous archaeologist in the world for like 6 months, and then his life imploded. And
what did he tap into? What did he open up that he wasn't supposed
to? He opened up for me, if you look at all of my characters, my short stories, my fiction, the thread is the guy never thinks he's good enough. If I had a therapist, she would have a ball with this. The guy never thinks he's good enough. He is the cause of his own downfall and demise. Has all the gifts in the world to be successful and just doesn't make it. And he was a great example. And history is full of examples. And I have a spreadsheet of people that I would love to write about if I was a good enough writer, who kind of exhibit that. So Byron de Prorock, I just identified with this character so much. He was the problem was he was a brilliant showman and a terrible businessman and not a particularly good archaeologist. But there is a thing, and this goes to stand-up, and writers do this to a lesser degree, nonfiction writers especially. The ability to present, the ability to communicate, the ability to stand and talk makes you 30% smarter than you actually are. Unless you go too far and go over the edge.
And suggest dinosaur comedy.
Okay, so there's a dinosaur theme to this, though.
Yeah, there is.
There's a dinosaur thing. So I'm 8 years old. This is when I learned this lesson, right? I'm 8 years old, and we're in 3rd grade doing the dinosaur diorama, right? You gluing the plastic dinosaurs to the shoebox and painting it. And we're supposed to be doing this in teams. We're supposed to be doing this in teams. And Janice Levy is diligently painting and gluing things, and everybody's being very, very, and I'm bouncing off the walls because I'm the redheaded, annoying, hyperactive child. But then the teacher says, okay, one of you has to get up and talk about this to the rest of the group. And I go, wait a minute, I get to stand at the front of the room, get all eyes on me, talk and not get in trouble for it. Ooh, sign me up. So I go to the front of the room. And, this is a Brachiosaurus, and this is a T-Rex, and they lived blah, blah, blah. And I knew all the big words. And as I'm going to the end and people are applauding, the teacher says, let's hear a big round of applause for Wayne's team. And I went, wait a minute. I did the least amount of work on this. I did the easiest part of the thing. I basically got to have fun. But because I could talk about it, I was credited as being the leader and the brains of the organization.
Yeah, that's
which if you ever met Janice Levy, that's insane because she is one of the smarter humans I've ever met in my life.
That's an early life lesson.
From that moment on, I spoke in church and I did this. I won public speaking competitions, and people assumed that I was way smarter than in fact I am. And when I had to get
of this notion until today,
when I had to get a real job, when I ran away from the circus, I eventually got a job teaching presentation skills because there were so many people out in the world, particularly in business, who were incredibly smart and couldn't communicate their ideas.
Yeah, it's a whole...
And the untalented loudmouths were getting promoted, and I knew this because I was one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's
so
it's
there's a dinosaur theme. Do you see how all this works?
They've been following you your whole life.
They have
now
indeed.
They have followed you here to this interview today. That
indeed.
gives me goosebumps. All right, well, we are getting close to the end here, and I like to always ask my question that I warned you about. So let's see this fabulous answer that you probably have, or like a one-liner. How do you feel about garden gnomes?
You would think, as an old white guy, that I would be very much accepting of them, and I am. I'm accepting of everybody. But garden gnomes are a very green Northern European kind of thing. And I live in the desert. And if you look at garden gnomes, they always have the tall hats and the very heavy clothing, and they would essentially melt. As well as the fact that they would be eaten. A garden gnome under a cactus just looks odd. So I would say in the right place at the right time, they're fabulous. Vegas in 115-degree heat is not the right place nor the right time.
I really like and respect that answer.
Thank you. I knew you would judge me on the contents of it. So I had to be very thoughtful about this.
Not at all. All right. Well, our half hour is up, and that went swimmingly fast. I don't know.
Good
for me anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad because you're the one that matters, right?
Very easy to talk to, Wayne. Why don't you kind of wrap up, tell people where they can find you, maybe a little plug for what you're currently working on?
Indeed. Well, let's do this. Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc is book 1 of the Werewolf PI series. Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker is book 2. Both are available now. You can buy them on Amazon, paperback, Kindle Unlimited. You know the drill. May 2nd, Johnny Lycan and the Last Witchfinder, which is the 3rd and final book in the series, at least for now, comes out. So you have time to read the first 2 books and then pre-order the 3rd one, which I think you really should do.
Yes.
You can find me, WayneTurmel.com, shockingly, is my website. I'm on Twitter, WTurmel. So please feel free to engage and have some fun. And, I have a Facebook author page, Wayne Turmel Author, because I gave a lot of time and thought to that. But that's it. I am not hard to find if people want to find me.
All right. Well, and earlier there was a comment from Sarah. Can you bring that back up, Joe, real quick? About the gnomes? Thank you. So she apparently has experience with this, which is great to know. They do bleach. I would imagine that they look kind of ghostly and even more freaky, Sarah. So
entirely
that
possible,
makes me
yeah.
like them more or less. I try to keep neutral on my gnome stance, but that intrigues me. Let's put it that way. All right. Well, thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, Nikki. This was a blast. Thank you for, being the best consolation prize ever.
Oh, look at that. Getting points with me. And thank you to everybody who joined us in the comments and for just, being the fabulous John Hammond impersonator that you are. I love that. Fabulous time. And remember, it's always time to go indie now.